Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a paid advertising. TheOnlyGround.com, onlyground.com is one of the most amazing places for information that I consistently go to. If you guys want to have conversations about our old interviews or even topics that we don't discuss, the group of people that are on the onlyground.com message boards are some of the most brilliant that I have ever come across. Those little like knickknack facts that we get here and there, that's where a lot of it comes from. Please check out the link in the bio.
Welcome to the Lights Out Podcast. This is Chris Lights Out Lytle, and this is our journey to document the history of mixed martial arts. I have brought with me my friend, the MMA detective Mike Davis, and together we will preserve the history and hear some great stories from the world in the era of the no holds barred. Thank you and enjoy.
Ladies and gentlemen, very few people that come on this podcast are as OCD and mentally ill about MMA history as kind of like the staff on this side of the camera. Let me present to you Mac Danzig. Mac, welcome to the show, dude.
What's up, man?
Your history in regards to mixed martial arts, it checks a lot of boxes from like people from like the mid 90s.
Yeah.
Like when you say, oh, you know, about mid 2000s when this guy fought, but then you look, or early 2000s, but you look at your resume, you're like, nah, no. It's like you're like a mid 90s fighter, like in terms of like your accomplishments. Would you agree with that?
Well, I would take that as a compliment. I mean,
huge.
I'm not sure I know I can say for sure that that's 100% true. I do feel like that era kind of passed me by to some degree, you know, as eras and generations of fighters overlap. But I mean, I grew up watching this stuff. It's the first time I ever saw the UFC was UFC 2. It was released on video very soon after the event happened. And I saw the VHS for it at there was this place called there was a chain of pharmacy slash overall department stores called Farmore, Pharmor, Farmore, and they had video rental, and I used to always rent the Van Damme movies and all that stuff. And I saw this, and I was looking at the cover, and I was like, "This looks real." And it's like it says it's real, but there's no way this could be real. And like I always had a good eye for photography and stuff, and had a good eye for like there was a picture of Scott Morris in the back, and he's all bloody and everything after the Pat Smith fight. And I'm like, this looks like an editorial shot. This doesn't look like the type of picture that they would have on the back of like a staged movie. And I was like, I gotta watch this. And I brought it home, and I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. I was like 14 or 15, mind you, right? I was 14. I was 14, yeah. And from that moment on, and this is like pre-internet. I mean, the internet was around, but it was in its infancy.
Yeah, it's nothing.
So like I would do whatever I could to find these videos. And then like, you know, as the years went by, I started, you know, by 96, I started becoming privy to extreme fighting and you know, and that whole thing. And then as the years went on, by 98, I was already tape trading and had like immersed myself in all the Vale Tudo things, like this underground stuff in Russia, any fights I could get a hold of. And I was just watching and studying before I ever even really got to train.
Okay.
For real. So like, that's just such a part of who I became and like why I was fighting, you know? And
well,
so
let me come full circle.
okay.
Circle. Now we started this with, you check a lot of the boxes from the guys from the 90s.
Yeah.
Are you a VHS guy in regards to that's where you learned a lot of your technique initially?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I remember like just watching. Oh yeah, 100%. I remember just watching.
It's a big
and
one.
trying to just absorb as much of this as I could and trying to understand different things. And I remember it was extreme fighting with John Peretti when Zinoviev fought Mario Sperry, and Mario Sperry was starting to pass his half guard. And Peretti was actually talking about what was happening. He's like, he's in half guard. He's stuck in half guard. He's prying himself out. Now he mounts up. Zinoviev rolls him. And I understood this stuff. Like I understood what I was looking at. And so once I finally started training, I maybe had like a tiny little bit of a leg up because I had all this time watching all this stuff and just focusing on the technique. Extreme fighting was great because it gave us a chance to focus on the technique. As fun as events like UFC 6 were with Tank Abbott and all that stuff, and that was so entertaining. I was a real connoisseur of like the technique, or at least as much of the technique
high end, high end, right? And like UFC 2, that was my first one as well. And if you look at the totality of the entire UFC library, that's probably the most violent event in the company's history.
For sure. And they didn't even show the whole Orlando Veit versus Jason DeLuca fight.
No.
And that was one of those that Big John messed up on. And he still feels bad about that to this day, you know, but because he just sort of spaced on all of that happening. The towel got thrown in and everything, and he didn't stop it. But yeah, that was brutal. Pat Smith versus Scott Morris was brutal. I mean, it was oh yeah, that was rough. Yeah.
You know, Edish,
poor guy.
Yeah, his story is incredible. Like, yeah, I'm just coordinating in the back. Just so you want to fight, I find out who I'm fighting in the ring, and like, that's not a guy you dump on. That's a guy you're like,
yeah,
that's a guy you circle around. You know,
everybody that did UFC 2, like you just got to give that. Like, you don't have to give them the same type of respect that you give other people in fighting nowadays, but there's a certain type of respect that every single person across the board immediately gets, you know?
Yeah.
Like, what is that Roberto Sierra Leone guy, the pentoxalate guy, like that got stuck on the bottom of Scarfold from Remco Pardul for like 15 minutes straight before he finally yeah. So,
and like you would like, it's interesting, you know, on my side is you get the guys just after the headbutt era, and it's like which is a crazy, you know, time to be in mixed martial arts, and they're like, oh no, that's one of the headbutt era guys. It's like there's levels of just nuttiness, and they all acknowledge it, and it's good stuff. It's really
well, I'm glad you're
it.
doing this project. I'm glad you're doing these interviews because I don't feel like a lot of people. I mean, I'll make references. I'm 45. I've got guys that train at my gym who are in their 40 or late 30s, maybe 40 years old, and I'll throw out references about stuff, and it'll just go right over the head. And I'm like, man, like, what, you don't know who Waleed Ismail was? Like, I'm like, dude, I was his roommate for 6 months, like, and they're just like, oh, I don't know, and I'm like, dude, come on, bro. You know, so yeah,
dude. So I work for BKFC, and the last time we were in Miami, I went to Ebenezer Braga's church. Like, we got Ebenezer Braga living like within 45 minutes. Dude, I'm going to his church, bro. I'm going to his church. I'm knocking on the door. He wasn't home, but I don't care. I'm going. That's Ebenezer Braga.
That's cool. Yeah.
So your beginnings is where I can trace is Raw Team. Is that where you started?
So it's not exactly where I started. So what happened was I was watching all this stuff, and I wanted to do it, and I wanted to have something to do with it, and I wanted to train. You have to understand, Pennsylvania in the late 90s, Western Pennsylvania, the best that you could do was somebody supposedly, there were two brothers that supposedly trained in their garage, and one of them was a blue belt under a Hoist affiliate somewhere in Ohio. That was the best you could do, and no one knew how to get a hold of these guys. And then the second best you could do, if you couldn't find them, which I don't know anyone who really did find them, was these Japanese jiu-jitsu schools that were in the yellow pages, right? And so there was nothing that was really happening in Western Pennsylvania. I ended up finding out through a guy who was a tattoo artist that he trained sometimes with a guy named Casey. And so I was like, okay, well, where's this Casey guy? And he's like, well, Casey's in San Diego. He's stationed as a Marine in Camp Pendleton down near San Diego, and he's training jiu-jitsu down there. And I heard he got his blue belt, and he's going to come back, and when he comes back, we'll train. And I'm like, okay, great. In the meantime, I just started rolling with this 308-pound tattoo artist guy on the mats of some Taekwondo gym for like a couple months. And then this Casey Leonard, finally showed up, and he was a blue belt, and that was a big deal. And Casey and I just started training. And then after maybe like 6 to 9 months, I kind of outgrew that, and I needed to start training with some other people. And I was in Western Pennsylvania, and so I heard that there was a club of guys in downtown Pittsburgh. It was called the Pittsburgh Mixed Martial Arts Club, and it was these guys who used a gym in the University of Pittsburgh for their training. And so I went there and met them, and there was a guy named Mike Willis who fought in hook and shoot a couple times. He eventually ended up fighting Aaron Riley, and I think he fought Hermes Franca too. But he had a couple fights, and the training wasn't very good. But these guys didn't know how to train. They didn't have good work ethic, and I was just all about it. I was like, please, like, let's train. Anyway, they didn't have a good training system. However, what they did have was the enthusiasm for the sport. So we would just sit there and talk. And I'd drive an hour to get to downtown Pittsburgh, and I would just train a little bit, and I would talk to these guys about fights, and we'd tape trade and everything else. I started doing fights then in like was it 2001, and I started doing some smaller shows and stuff. And I remember there was one other guy in the area, and he's definitely worth mentioning. I didn't get to train with him a lot. It's a guy named Chris Custer, who was he actually fought Joe Dirksen in WWE.
Legend.
Yeah, and who Joe I know very well too. I trained with Joe quite a bit. And the thing about Chris Custer is he's one of those guys. He didn't really perform. He was like, you could say he was like an early Mike Pyle. I don't know if you know much about Mike Pyle.
Of course. Yeah.
Mike Pyle was the best guy ever in the room, and he accomplished a lot in fighting in the UFC. He's got some great wins. He beat Josh Neer and Ricardo Almeida, and he's just a good fighter. But he didn't fulfill his potential. And Chris Custer was like that. He's an amazing guy. Definitely elemental in me upping myself and moving forward. He helped me out a lot. That guy, he's a good guy. Yeah.
So Mike Pyle and Jay Huron were the guys in Vegas that would green light some of the new guys coming in.
Yeah.
He was kind of part of that, or the welcoming committee, the people coming off the street thinking they were tough. So when, we're talking about the mid-90s boxes that are checked, you start with the Raw team. How does that happen? How do you make that connection?
So for me, what ended up happening was I was in Pennsylvania, and I was training with Chris Custer every now and then, but not that often. And then train with these other guys, Mike Willis and these guys at the Pittsburgh Mixed Martial Arts Club. Mike says one day, I'm moving to California. I've got an aunt who lives in Huntington Beach, and her house is like right down the road from Team Punishment with Fabiano Iha and Tiki Gozan and Tito Ortiz. And I'm going to move down there. And in his words, she had either a 5 or 7 bedroom house in Huntington Beach, and it was no problem, and I could stay there. And so within a month or two, I had won some regional stuff. I had won like Monte Cox's Extreme Challenge Trials in the Eastern version of it, and I had won the nationals. Right. And so I had that like kind of backing me up and making
little resume.
Yeah, giving me some motivation to do this. And I had already fought a couple pro fights too, down in Louisiana and one in Decatur, Illinois. And so I had some stuff going, and I was like, I'm all in on this. And he went out there 2 weeks before I did. And then once he got out there, I stopped hearing from him, and he wasn't returning my calls or anything. And I was like, like I could tell something's going wrong. What ended up happening was it wasn't really a place for me to stay. It wasn't a place that was going to work. Once I got there, he had brought his brother with him. Both of his parents were there. Some other guy was living there. I ended up staying, like, I got there and I slept like in a 1-car garage where they had a bunch of stuff stored on the floor just with a sleeping bag. And I was like, man, like this isn't good. And a friend of ours, a guy, had said, you guys should check out the Raw team before you go and train with Fabiano Iha and Tiki Gozan. So I said, all right, let's do that. It's a 45-minute drive from Huntington Beach to El Segundo with no traffic. So we went up there, and as soon as I walked in, there's Rico Chiaperelli, there's Frank Trigg, there's Vladimir Matyushenko, there's Eric Paulson,
Oh,
there's Waleed Ishmael. And I'm like, I'm training. I get in there, I work with those guys. I'm like, this is a wrap. I'm going here. This is where I'm going. And so over the course of the next few months, it became apparent that, Mike, he was injured, but he also didn't have the drive to do it. He was kind of a lazier guy. God bless him, like, but he just didn't have it in him to train the way they trained at Raw. And I did, and I was getting my ass kicked, but I loved every minute of it. And I became Frank Trigg's protege guy for a little bit. Rico didn't want to have anything to do with me in that way. I was still green. I mean, he was there helping me out and stuff, but he wasn't like gonna put himself out on the line for this brand new kid. So I was Trigg's project.
there was also an age difference between you and them, a considerable age difference, as well as you're talking about Olympic ladder wrestlers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's your entry point.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. I only had
like
a year and a half of training with absolutely low level people in comparison before I went there. And so when I got there, it was just like trial by fire. I was learning Olympic lifting at the same time and trying to learn wrestling. I had no wrestling, and I was just getting smashed by these guys. And that was like what made me tough. Those formative years is like gave me at least a lot of resistance to pain, I would say.
Oh, for sure.
Just smash me, and one of the best jiu-jitsu guys that has ever lived was there, and still doesn't get much credit. A guy named Fernando Vasconcelos, who won worlds as a black belt at the age of 16. And anyone who knows Fernando Vasconcelos knows those years that he was in the United States, and he still is, but he don't train no more, from what I understand. Those years, like at least in the gym, there was no one really touching this guy. Like you hear about Rickson. Everyone has always talked about Rickson. Rickson has a mystique, and then you see guys like the guys like Marcelo Garcia level guys, and well, it's Marcelo. You watch him roll with people in his gym. Fernando was that guy. He just didn't have he wasn't quite ready for MMA competition, but he was amazing in the gym. Ask Eric Paulson. He'll tell you, like, nobody's touching Fernando Vasconcelos in the gym. He was that guy. Yeah.
Did Rico Chiaperelli, did he ever talk to you about rolling with Rickson?
Yeah. He told me what happened. Yeah, he gave me a rundown of his version of it. He basically said nothing happened. Said him and Dan Henderson came there, and they came there before the class, and Rickson made them sit and wait and watch the whole class, and they did the entire class. And then once like the main group of the students left, then he said, yeah, you can come here and roll. And Rickson insisted that they start on the knees, not standing. And according to Rico, and Rico has been nothing but a truthful guy the entire time I've known him, he just said nothing really happened, and he said the whole thing was kind of dumb. And since then, I mean,
think about the volume. Think about the volume of that. Yeah, it was just dumb.
Yeah.
Against what, the greatest, allegedly the greatest grappler in the world. I mean,
well, that's Rico. Like, Rico was one of the most special guys in the grappling realm ever. Like he injuries held him back. He was he missed out by being in the Olympics by this much. You know, he lost to Schultz, and when he lost to Schultz, he had just beat Schultz. You know how those how it goes with the Olympic trials. You
Round
can go
robin.
one
Yeah.
and one against someone, and then because that you lost the second match that you guys had, you're out. That's what happened to Kyle Dake against Jordan Burroughs one of these times, and that's what happened. He beat Schultz, and then he had another match against them and lost by points to him, and that was it. Schultz won gold that year. And so, you know, that's the caliber that Rico's at. And Rico, unlike a lot of wrestlers that are at a high level, he really understood jujitsu and understood MMA like innately. It wasn't a problem for him to adapt. He wasn't. I guarantee you, he wasn't one of those guys who was getting guillotine nonstop for the first year and a half. You know, like he was not that guy.
My belief, and dude, what do I know? But my belief is that the experiences that Rickson had with Chiaperelli, with Mark Schultz. I mean, Mark Schultz went with him for almost an hour and was only submitted twice with zero jujitsu.
Yeah.
My belief is Rickson touching and understanding what kind of athletes those two people were.
Yeah.
Pretty much just said, you know what, ADCC, no Olympic wrestlers, not for the first 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. It's hard for me to say. I have a great deal of respect for Rickson and a lot of for a lot of reasons. But again, my knowledge of Rickson is nothing firsthand as far as training goes. You know, when I'm training with Crone, he has come by the gym and, you know, we say hi and everything. But yeah, I can't say. I never got a chance to roll with him in his prime, so I don't know. But rolling with Fernando Vasconcelos at that time, yeah, like that dude was special for
All
sure.
right. So your first fight on record's June 23rd, 2001, Mass Destruction. And like, if you kind of look at your beginning career, your amateur career, even the beginning of your pro career, it's clear, one, you never said no. And two, I don't think you really did a lot of research on your opponent because it's Kurt Pelligrino.
Well, here's the thing with the Pellegrino thing. So that first fight, that was, yeah, mass destruction. That was some open hand, like pseudo pancrase rules thing where you weren't allowed to punch close fist. And even though it's on the amateur record, to me, it really wasn't MMA. What happened with that was they just said, here's a wrestler. And Kurt, as far as I know, hadn't had any fights before then. All he had was, I think he was a state champ in New Jersey, which is a big deal. Like in wrestling, that's like in New Jersey state champ, Pennsylvania state champ. That's like that's quite a few steps up from
California, Texas, those are the big
exactly.
states. Big states.
Yeah,
Iowa.
So I knew that he was probably going to win the wrestling exchanges, but I was just trying to get in there. And what happened was he threw. At some point, he was in my guard and he sat up and he threw a couple palm strikes and they followed it up with a headbutt right to my nose. Broke my nose. And so they couldn't stop the bleeding. The blood was draining back into my mouth and I kept spitting out globs of blood. And they had a ridiculous person working as there's a guy named Randy Rowe who was working their what do you call it, medical staff or whatever, and he was like a kind of helping ref, and he didn't know what he was doing. And at some point they just said, oh, we can't do it, we can't get him to stop bleeding. And so they said, oh, the fight's over. I'm like, well, he headbutted me, you know. And they're just
It's
like,
foul.
oh. Yeah, and they're like, oh, well, then they just wanted to give him a belt, so they gave him a belt. And so
he sold a lot of tickets. Back.
Probably.
He sold a lot of tickets.
So that fight kind of
hand.
left a bad taste in my mouth. So I just viewed that as not even really a fight. That was just a weird experience. Being in Massachusetts at the time with Keurig and all those guys, it was just weird. Like it was just a weird scene. Like I can't say that they're bad people or anything. I just got a bad vibe with the whole, like that whole Massachusetts thing. I'd gone over there for a grappling tournament. So Monte Cox had this extreme.
Wait a minute. Yeah, I got a counter here.
Yeah.
Do you think it's strange that Kip puts himself on his posters wearing a
Oh,
belt?
that's the weirdest thing. It's the weirdest thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't even know if what's it called, Naga still exists.
it does. It does.
Yeah,
It,
but
dude,
yeah,
he's still on a poster.
yeah, dude, it's so weird. Yeah, it's so strange. I never understood that. Like I want to say something, and I don't mean to put anyone down, but
Uh,
my entire life has been trying to escape the East Coast and to try to remove myself from that gray cloud covered, depressed sports team, uh eccentric, like there's just this culture of what are the Pittsburgh Steelers going to do? Like, who cares what the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to do? Like, what do you want to do with your life? Oh, well, I'm okay. I got a good job as a assistant something or other at UPS, and it pays $7 an hour, and I get benefits after 6 months. And it's like, that's like the culture back east, and everyone is just consumed with their stupid local sports team. And everyone in Massachusetts, especially, I'm gonna make so many enemies. It doesn't matter. Half the world hates me anyway. But the guys in Massachusetts just gave like the worst vibe. And like I mean, one of my closest friends these days is Kenny Florian, and he's from Massachusetts. So like they're not all bad. But my entire life I've been trying to move away from this East Coast bitterness.
So if I could kind of put some
Yeah,
context to this,
yeah, sure.
they had a court in jail in the Eagles Stadium. That's how rampant crime was during a football game.
Yeah.
That you paid admission to get into. It wasn't like it's not a free thing you get to go to.
Yeah. It's
Weird.
really strange to me to like a lot of these cities and towns are based upon economy that no longer exists. They were coal mining towns, they were steel mill towns, they were metropolises that were based on a completely different set of economical values, and now it's like all just retail. And so unless you have a degree and you're like a doctor, a lawyer or something, you're going to be working in retail. And then during your break, you're going to go and spend your minimum wage check on another retail store, and you don't get ahead. And at the end of the week, you talk about the stupid football team, which is
Phillies.
comprised of people who have nothing to do with your local area.
All right, we're gonna move on. We're gonna move on.
Yeah.
We're gonna move on. So anyway, Kip Kohler's still on his posters, wearing his own belt from his organization. And he's shirtless, dude. He's shirtless. He's shirtless on it. It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. Yeah. And it's like a 20-year-old picture. Anyway, the first time I got to see you fight, August 25th, 2001, Extreme Challenge. So Monte Cox, he had like these tournaments, and they were amateur tournaments, but it was a lot of really good feeder people from like all over the country would get in it. So you got into an 8-man tournament, and Rich Franklin's on the card. So we got to see Rich Franklin about a dozen fights before he got to the UFC. His brother Greg Franklin is on the card too. He's like real estate guy. Big Papa Schnocky is the ring announcer. I believe he was a ring announcer there. I'm not exactly sure, but it was right around this time that Big Papa Schnocky and I hooked up. But you got Kurt Kindred, and like what I noticed about you was in this tournament is at this point, ankle locks and stuff like that. In the jiu-jitsu community, that's garbage. It's garbage. Like it's junk jiu-jitsu, and it was frowned upon in the Brazilian communities.
Sure.
Still is. Still, yeah. You got
to some degree.
Yeah. You start off the tournament with your first two guys, and you win by ankle lock on both guys. And I think on a second guy, something popped.
Yeah,
if my memory is correct.
Yeah, the first fight, it was, these were like 2 rounds, and if it was even, they gave you a third sudden death round, right? And so I was exhausted at the end of this fight, and I had this guy's back, Kurt Kindred, and then a couple weeks earlier, that same guy that I had been training with, Casey Leonard, he taught this this calf slicer from Back Control. And so I had just, that's kind of how I was. Like I was picking up everything like a sponge at the time. And I had this guy's back. There was 10 seconds left. I knew I wasn't going to be able to finish him. He was tucking his chin. So I just went for the calf slicer and I got it on him with like 9 seconds left in the fight. And then the second guy,
It was screamed. He screamed.
yeah.
Yeah,
The
I remember
second
that.
guy,
I wish there was video on it still, dude.
There is. I have a shaky VHS video that someone filmed of it. I do. I do have some footage of it. And then the second fight was a guy named Kevin Rooney, who I don't know what his deal was.
Is it Michael Rooney?
Huh?
Michael Rooney.
Michael Rooney. That's right. Why am I thinking Kevin Rooney?
He's an actor.
Yeah. Okay. But
okay.
Yeah, Michael Rooney. Yeah. I don't know. I just knew that I wanted to submit him as soon as I could. So I got a takedown and I just fell back for a heel hook. And I just, because I wanted to get to the finals without having a grueling match like the first one was. But yeah, those were fun times, man. That's
Jason Holderman. You win him in dude. That's another box you got to check. You did a tournament.
Yeah. That was exactly. Yeah,
your first tournament.
Yeah, first tournament, 3 fights in one night, one by submission. That's when I knew I wanted to do this. I remember driving 7 hours back home by myself. I had no corner. I drove by myself back home and stopping at a rest stop somewhere in Ohio and just being like so much adrenaline still from winning this tournament, you know?
Well, your life outside of mixed martial arts and like the career you were in, there's very little, if any, documentation on it, including when you were on The Ultimate Fighter. Like they never highlighted like your roots. In fact, like, the first that we even knew of anybody is when you thanked your mom when you beat Tom Spear.
Yeah.
But other than that, like no mention of dad, childhood sports. Frank Trigg alluded in one of his commentaries that you had a rough upbringing. But there was nothing there. Like that was like the one void that I noticed in regards to you and your career.
Yeah. I guess maybe some of it is that I'm a bit of a private person.
Very.
But the thing was, I mean, especially now, you know, once I had my career and everything, I've gone on my way. I do keep a social media page for my gym, but like I don't play on there. It's not a healthy place for me to swim around in it, being online at all, like really, and as me or social media at all. But anyway, yeah, I mean, like I grew up poor. I mean, I grew up poor for American standards, and it was just me and my mom, and we were kind of like, you know, running from something all the time, you know, running from my dad, running from like whatever, you know, like we lived life like in a way where we were trying to get away from other people all the time, you know, and what that amounted to was basically when my formative years of growing up, like my middle school years, where you're starting to figure out how to become a man. I was in like this area of Virginia, and the school that I was at was like very, very predominantly African American, and I was like one of the only white kids there, and which is whatever. It's the way you got to deal with whatever color you are whenever you're the minority.
It's life.
But it was rough. And one thing that I didn't like was being disrespected. And I was small. I was a little guy, you know. I was a small 14-year-old, small 13-year-old. And so a lot of these guys at 13, 14 already had their man bodies, and they were just fighting each other. And, you know, there were fights like all the time at this school. It was really rough. And I just kind of stepped back and was like, man, like, I want to at least know how to do this. I didn't like being bullied. I didn't like being disrespected. So that's probably one of the reasons why I got myself into martial arts, because, you know, I wanted to be capable and I didn't want to freeze up. I had somebody just tell me recently, they don't call it fight or flight anymore. They call it flight, freeze, or fight, freeze, or flight, instead of fight or flight. And because that makes sense, because that's what always would happen to me in fights as a kid. I would freeze up. I would just like not do anything. And I'd just be getting hit in the face and like, oh, I don't know what to do. Right. And so I wanted to master that. And that's probably why I ended up, like going into it and trying to, I looked at some of these guys. Like Carlos Newton was a big hero of mine at the time, and I coming up, and I was like, I wanted to be like that, like this person who was like calm and could deal with whatever situation. Oleg Taktarov early on was a big
dude,
because he was just so tough,
stoic.
Yeah, stoic, tough. I mean, Hoist to some degree, you got it. Like what he did was awesome.
Yeah, Hackney versus Emmanuel Yarbrough.
Yeah, that was gnarly. Yeah,
mind blowing at the time.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I remember feeling like when there was that one moment when Yarbrough got him and kind of had him his back and was starting to hit him. I got claustrophobic just watching like that. I was like, oh man, like he's gonna
the cage door opened.
Yeah. Busted the cage door open. Yeah, crazy. Yeah.
Even like you mentioned Zinoviev and Sperry, like Sperry won that entire fight, but Zinoviev wouldn't quit.
Yeah.
And eventually Mario got tired.
Yep. That was a first taste that the Brazilians had of something really international. Not just some random sambo guy who doesn't have good grappling technique, but someone who's willing to stay in there and like possibly die if they have to, like that was just the way these Eastern Bloc guys were. I was a huge fan of Karim Barkalev, if you remember him.
Dude,
he was one of those guys that was like, man, how did he even get here? I heard he had to like, it was a 90-minute trip, like on horseback or something. I mean, I don't know how much of this is embellished, but I heard it was like forever for him to get to some judo gym to train at. And this guy was fighting top level guys and doing well. I thought he won that tournament that Dave
he definitely beat Dave Monet.
Yeah, I thought he beat Monet.
Yeah, we were just talking. We did like a year-end wrap-up, and he gave the finger to Ricardo Arona in Abu Dhabi.
He got stuck in jail.
He stuck in, dude, they were going to take his arm off. It was like 99. And so I'm working a deal with these guys from the American Top Team. They've got like a group of Muslims in Coconut Creek that are all from like Turkmenistan, Dagestan. They're all from like those Stan eras. And I'm like, I'm going to get you guys free tickets to one BKFC, but I need to talk to Karim Barkalev. And I'm like, contact whoever it is you got back in the homeland. I want, even to a translator, I don't care. I want Barkalev. It's just, those guys are amazing. So, like, if you also like continue in your career, like you won the Cincinnati tournament, the 8-man. More often than not, Monty promised a pro fight when they won a tournament. Was that your case?
If I had a penny for every time Monty promised something, I'd probably have at least a couple dollars. I think that was promised. Even medals and plaques were promised. Look, Monty was very elemental in helping me in certain ways, especially after all of this, even after my first stint at Raw. So I don't want to crap on him too much, but bro, I have not met a promoter like I've met guys who have dabbled in promotion for an event or two or three, but like I haven't met an actual promoter that has ever been anything other than eye rolling at fighters at the best. Like none of these guys follow through with the stuff that they say, and of course they have all kinds of comebacks to that argument, and I'm sure fighters are a giant pain in the ass to deal with. But every now and then you get someone like me who was serious about it and put everything into it and wasn't just some jackass guy who wanted to fight. And I get lumped in with everybody else to these guys. You were supposed to get a pro contract, whatever that meant. I will say this, I did call him on it years later, and he he helped me get in with King of the Cage, but then he advised me as acting as a manager to sign an exclusive contract with King of the Cage, which at the time was one of the worst decisions that I made, because I was stuck with King of the Cage even when the UFC wanted me. But it is
It's
what
interesting. Yeah, it's
yeah.
interesting. Like here, so August 25th, 2001, you win your 8-man tournament. No pro contract was given. January 6th, you're in Iowa. I was 100% at this one as well. You do a 4-man tournament. You beat Tim Hernandez, and in the finals, you beat a standout wrestler, Joe Jordan.
Yeah. So Joe Jordan ended up
Future UFC
fighting
vet.
in UFC
Yeah.
years
Yeah.
later against Hermes Franca. Joe Jordan did not have to have a fight. It was only a 3-man tournament. So I had a grueling match with this Tim Hernandez guy who was a Militich guy. I pretty much won both of the first 2 rounds, but they said, let's bring it to a 3rd round. Because
He's 3-1 too at this point. So he's got leg experience, but all your fights are on, same night, or you had a pancreas. So I mean, it's fair. It's fair on
What
pace.
was cool for me at least was in that fight, he had like some of my heroes in his corner. I mean, this fight's in a bar called the Stars and Stripes Bar in Illinois somewhere, and sorry, Des Moines, Iowa, or wherever it was. And he's got Pat Miletich, Jeremy Horn, and Matt Hughes, all 3 of these guys in his corner. And I beat him. You know what I mean? I beat him. I made him quit. I armbarred him in the 3rd round. And all those guys were super cool afterwards. It was really cool being able to connect with. I didn't talk with Matt much at the time, but I talked with Jens Pulver. I talked with Jeremy Horn. I talked with Pat Miletich, who gave me technical advice. And then I fought Joe Jordan afterwards, who was unknown at the time. But I'll tell you, I looked at him and I was like, oh, I'm gonna kill this guy. My corner,
Really?
the guy that was helping me corner me was like, you're gonna kill him. Look at him, because he was kind of pudgy, And I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, like I'm still young in this. I hadn't trained at Raw yet. I'm just making shit up as I go along. And I went out there all like doing this, like I was Muay Thai all of a sudden, right? And I'm doing this and I'm just whipping these leg kicks at him. And I'm kicking the crap out of his leg over and over and over again. But I'm not kicking with my shin. I'm slapping him with my foot. And like he's just taking them. And I'm like, well, if this guy's just gonna take leg kicks all night, like whatever. And I just keep cracking him with these leg kicks. And then at some point, he just counters one of them, this big overhand left, and like knocks me back, and I'm like, whoa. And then my corner is like, yo, he's waiting to counter. You got to be careful. So that fight was tough. I ended up winning decision in that one. And then so I won the Nationals, Extreme Challenge Nationals at that point. And no fight contract, nothing like that. I moved to Raw. I kept in touch with Monty, but he didn't really get anything going for me. It's the way it is, man.
Yeah, your first pro fight. Listen, I'm not trying to dump on anybody, but like if you look at your career, okay, it starts in New Jersey, then you're in Ohio, and then you're in Iowa. And then you're going back to Iowa. You appear like kind of Ong El Insang. It's like you're a perennial B-side, and it's not because you're not tough. It's you're a man without a home. You're not a ticket seller, and all you are is cannon fodder for somebody that's either super tough that nobody wants to fight, or they're trying to get you beat.
Yeah.
Like your career is hard. You took a hard road.
Yeah, for sure I did. And I mean, the people that realize that are few and far between. You're one of them. But for the most part, like nobody really knows that. I think anyone who does remember me at this point is just like, oh, wasn't that guy who was a jerk on The Ultimate Fighter, and he was a vegan and
bird feeder guy.
yeah. It's just there you go. Like I've been
pigeonholed
as
I was
angry vegan guy. Yeah, and so what are you gonna do, man? All you can do is what you can do. You just do your best with what you got, and I did, and I always just wanted to fight. I remember it didn't matter to me. That's why I fought tough fights in weight classes up just to get in there. You know, I wasn't ever really yeah, it was even when I was in King of the Cage as a champion, Terry Treblecock knew I wouldn't sell tickets because I wasn't here to hustle my friends and acquaintances and their friends and acquaintances for tickets so that I could make him money. So he never really had me fighting locally in California much.
Well,
He sent me up to Canada all the time,
well,
which I love.
we're gonna get into all that because
Okay.
like even as a champion, they put you on the road against
Yeah.
ticket sellers.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like the most bogus thing you can do to a champion rather than build them. It's, oh, we got a guy, you know, in Illinois that's in Rockford's a real big ticket seller that's super tough. Send our champion there. Let him go get hometown.
Can I
That's
tell you a story about that?
get there.
If we
No,
want, we keep going back and we keep building. It's up to you.
I'd rather just build because, dude, I don't even. I had like 6 pages of notes on you and your career, and I haven't even touched the UFC. And
Yeah.
like, if you look at it, I'd rather just kind of build because, dude, it's nuts. Like, it's actually nuts to where it's like you should have quit. But like, I can't tell you like how many times in your career, and
I almost did a few
you
times.
clear.
I mean,
Well, here,
I
let's talk
felt
about
like
your first
quitting.
pro fight. Let's talk about your first pro fight, Cedric Marks. Now you're going to sit here and go, well, hey, who's Cedric Marks? Cedric Marks has got to win over Jimmy Burketta, and he's got to win over Gabe Lemley. Hung out a lot with Laverne Clark, super heavy-handed, and a tough SOB. He's 8-4, and that's your pro debut.
Yeah.
Like, there's no favor there.
Yeah, that was on 4 days notice, you know? Yeah. It was just that's the way it was. It was like, hey, like will you do this? Because my training partner, Mike Willis, got called in on 4 or 5 days notice to fight Phil Johns in the main event of that. And he said, hey, I've got another guy who just won the Extreme Challenge Eastern Trials. Well, can he come and fight? And they said, yeah, we need an opponent for a guy named Cedric Marks. And so I said, let's do it. And that was that.
So reality combat fighting, you
Mhm.
fight, which is Rich Clementi's event. You fight Rick Totorico and
Ray Totorico. Yeah.
is it Rick or Ray?
Ray Totorico.
Is it Ray? Okay. So one of the hardest submissions to really land, and one of the scarcest, is the omoplata in an MMA. And like you see that on somebody's record, and you go, I mean, it makes you pause. Like, wait, what?
So the story behind that is I had just watched the first Matt Serra versus Shoney Carter fight where Matt Serra got knocked out with a spinning back fist at the very end of the fight. And during that fight, Matt Serra tried to omoplata Shoney Carter at least twice, and he tried to reverse omoplata once. And me being this tape studying guy, we recorded it, the pay-per-view off of VHS. The pay-per-view was like $29.99 at the time. And I watched this over and over, and I was like, what is this thing he's doing? I don't know what the timeline is from the Shoney Carter Matt Serra first fight until my fight with Ray Totorico, but however much time in there, I tried to make that move mine. That was what I was doing. And I was hitting it on people in the gym all the time. Nobody knew. Everybody would get on top inside my guard, and they would just leave their arms wrapped around me. And I had good hip flexibility. So I would just pull my leg in and start slowly forcing an omoplata. And then I would get out to the side, and I knew that this guy hadn't seen it before. I watched one of Ray Totorico's fights. He was a journeyman. He's a tough guy, but he's like, he's
guys like him are needed. They're needed to help build guys like yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was a gamer. And I watched him fight Rich Crunkleton in the WEF because I had all the videos I could get a hold of. And I did not have the Greco-Roman wrestling pedigree that Crunkleton had, but I watched Crunkleton just throw him around, and I was like, all right. I was like I got this one. So I knew I was going to omoplata him. And Rich Clementi, maybe did have something to do with the promotion a little bit, but the guys that brought me in were Chad Robichaux and Kurt Schmidt, I think his name was. Or maybe I'm wrong about his name. Something Schmidt. He had fought. He has a loss. Schmidt had a loss against Carlos Newton on his record.
Okay. Yeah.
Carl Schmidt. Carl Schmidt. Yep. Good guy. Yeah. Carl Schmidt and Chad Robichaux. Those are the guys who brought me down. And they brought me down because I had won Monty's amateur tournament.
So Monty at this point had his fingers in so many different regions. Like in terms of like setting up shop, like he was McDonald's. Like he knew everybody in every little region. He was probably 70 fighters deep on his roster. And there was actual UFC talent contacting him where he's just like, yeah, I can't take you.
Yeah. 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 That's kind of how he was, you know, and
Clemente was a part of that. Yeah.
What's that?
Clemente was a part of that.
Yep. Yeah. So, you know, that was the deal. And once I got to Raw, I was kind of like letting Frank Trigg and Rico do my fights for me and everything. But you know,
is this the time where you go out to Raw?
So yeah, so I went out to Raw in February of 2022. So it was after, so I had
2002.
The second Extreme Trials Nationals fight against Joe Jordan and Hernandez. And then that's when my friend Mike Willis moved out to Huntington Beach, and I moved out there to live with him. And I only ended up staying at that house for like a month, and then I immediately got my own job. Frank Trigg got me a job. Rico got me another job. I was doing construction. I was doing security, and I found a roommate, this kickboxing kid. I just started rooming with him, and then just starting to train and try to train as hard as I could. But
how old were you?
I wasn't ready for the training.
How old were you?
I was 22, and I was not ready for that level of training. Like my mind was ready for it, my heart was ready for it, my body was like, you know, my physical experience, besides just being a kid who ran around and played a lot and maybe played soccer as a little kid, my experience like doing anything physical was skateboarding. I was a street skater, and I was like deep into skateboarding. And so besides being tough and being able to fall and roll around on concrete and slam down on concrete and get hurt and get back up, I had no physical experience really training like this. And Frank Trigg and Vladimir Matyushenko and all these guys, they were all just training with, they were training at this, like you said, like Olympic caliber, like the D1 wrestler, the national level wrestler stuff. They were all doing.
Oh, they were beyond that. They're beyond D1. Like D1 is like Mark Coleman, when John Jones approached him, he's like, well, you know, I'm junior college All-American. Mark's like, yeah, that's good. You know, go in the kids pool. Go in, you know, over there. Because Matyushenko is a senior in high school, wins the Tbilisi wrestling tournament. He's got to win over Kevin Jackson and Dave Schultz as an 18-year-old child. He's one of the guys in your room. Yeah, you got John Donohue, who's one of 5 black belts under Gene LaBelle.
Yeah.
Do you remember working out with him?
Yeah, John would come around, and I always got a really good vibe from him. He was cool. But he was, you know, I'll be honest with you, it was kind of like he would come and he'd be there, but he'd roll with Trigg and he'd talk and chop it up with Rico. Randy. But it was kind of like the adults are over there playing, and I was kind of like the kid. And so that's kind of the vibe that I got. It wasn't like John was never uncool to me. It was just they kind of had their thing going on, and I was kind of excluded from it. But John was around, and when he was in the States, that's where he was. And yeah, he was cool. I remember he was very critical of Elvis Sinisic at the time. which is pretty funny. Yeah.
Like the Gene LaBelle guys, like Peretti, John
Yeah.
Lewis, Zinoviev, they're a different kind of human.
Yeah.
Like I just had John Donohue on. He's the drop right before you. And he's just like, yeah, I only got 7 black belts. Some people, there'll never be a black belt, no matter how long they try or how much time they've got in. And he's just like, they're just not a black belt. And one of my competitors has got 100 black belts. He's like, is there really a value there?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, it's gotten watered down. I mean, sport jujitsu has come like, it's like, to me, what jujitsu was always about was like the early UFCs and the Gracie in action tapes and stuff. And like, yeah, so sure, the guys that they were fighting were at a disadvantage because they didn't understand the ground, but they didn't understand the stand up, and they were still able to make it a ground fight. And it was about reality. It was about, this is what's going to happen in a real fight, like Pedro Sauer versus Lance Bachelor. It's like, that is what jujitsu was about to me, right?
Yeah.
Now, when you take what jujitsu is about now, it's like some 125-pound hipster guy with $60,000 worth of tattoo work, who will do some weird floppy thing that makes you kind of fall over for a second. He gets sweet points.
Yeah. The donkey
And
guard.
the whole
Yeah.
time that he's doing it, he's susceptible to strikes, but there are no strikes allowed. And he's just holding on to your gi, and he's got a black belt because he's been doing it for 8 years. And it's like, that ain't
$700 flip
what it was
flops.
about. That's
Yeah.
not what this was supposed to be about. And
Uh,
so, to me, like, as corny as karate became in the 70s and 80s, with 11-year-old girls as black belts and all this board breaking nonsense and everything pandering to the suburban child, to me, jujitsu has just turned into the same exact thing. And so that's why you gotta, I don't know, you gotta find like the right people and everything, because I don't know, jujitsu is starting to get watered down. It has for a while, but yeah,
it's not about self-defense anymore. That's for sure.
yeah.
It's like
It's about
gaming the
making
system,
money.
and
Just,
it's like points. It's like, hey, just play a video game. So are
well,
you?
it makes me think, and I've said this before, that perhaps the karate, like, maybe karate guys and kung fu guys and all these traditional martial arts, maybe they didn't know a whole lot about the ground stuff specifically, but I bet before the strip mall karate stuff became an industry in the United States, I bet a black belt in karate was a legit fighter. You know what I'm saying? I bet those guys in the 40s and 50s and
Oh
like all
yeah.
the decades before that were legit dudes. I think that what happened was money got involved and industry got involved, and then it's like, how can we charge rich parents to give another belt test to the kid, and how many belts can we possibly give this kid before before we get.
They stopped paying us. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Like, dude, for me to give an opinion on what you guys do in the gym, like, do I have a boxing background? Of course. Is it something that I should even talk about? Probably not. But I had about 50 fights from the age of 8 until about 18. So like I understand like the gym camaraderie and the push and the give and the go. And I've never had a gi, I've never rolled, but I will say, sitting on my couch, if you can't do a mid-level high school takedown, are you really a black belt? And yes, the answer is yes, according to the video game type,
Yeah.
structure that's happening right now. But like, I understand guard pulling, but you got to be able to do a takedown.
Yeah, I mean, how do you get the fight to the ground? The fight doesn't start, on the ground. The fight starts standing most 99% of the time.
Yeah.
And then, this is the dilemma. This is why things have to evolve. Look at Hoist versus Sakuraba. That's just like, that's it in a nutshell. You can't get this guy down. And so what are you going to do, and luckily for Hoist, Sakuraba wasn't a knockout artist. Yeah, but you know what I mean. It's that's got to be part of the art. And so to me, good jiu-jitsu just goes hand in hand with good wrestling. Otherwise, well, what are you doing?
That's why you were at Team Raw. And Frank Trigg really took to you. Like, yeah, when he's doing commentary in a couple of your fights, like you could tell he genuinely really liked you a lot. You guys got along.
Yeah, he was like a mentor of mine. The thing, it was a weird dynamic. So understand that when I first came to Raw, I was 22, and the one thing that I wasn't okay with was disrespect. And no one blatantly disrespected me. Everyone had a certain amount of respect for me, but I was still like the kid. You know what I mean? I was still like one of these like lower level guys in comparison to the guys that already were in fighting the UFC and stuff. And Trig took me under his wing. Rico didn't really want to have anything to do with me just yet, he let me be Trig's project. And so Trig put me through the ringer, beat the crap out of me, I was just going through the school of Raw, at the time. And what ended up
Were there other beginners like you there, or were
there
you
were there was enough guys for me to be able to
okay?
I wasn't just at the bottom of the totem pole. I was probably like
Ed Herman, was he there? Ryan Schultz,
none of
Chelsonen?
those guys. No, those guys were Oregon guys, and those guys were dealing with Couture's gym up in Oregon.
Okay.
Those guys never trained at Raw in LA.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Raw in LA was let's see here. So it was Rico Chiaperelli, Frank Trigg, Vladimir Matyushenko.
Henderson.
Henderson had just left before I got there. Okay.
Okay.
Henderson and Lindland weren't part of that one by the time I got there. So you had
Erickson.
no, Erickson wasn't there either. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. No, it was
Okay.
it was Vladdy, Trigg, Rico, and it was Fernando Vasconcelos, the jiu-jitsu
Okay.
guy I was telling you about. And then coming through was Waleed Ishmael all the time. Eric Paulson was there quite a bit. Some really high level wrestlers who I don't know if they're kind of forgotten. A guy named Ryan Tobin, who was I think a D1 All American at least once, or no, at least I think he was a D1 champion, like a national champion. Ryan Tobin. You would have to look it up though. He was a high level wrestler. And there were some other guys rolling through there. Right off the top of my head, there's a guy named Kengo Yura, this Japanese kid who had fought in Shudo a few times. He was there. It's starting to escape me, but a lot of people came through. A lot of people came through there. Frank Shamrock came through there a bit.
Antonio McKee, did he show up over there?
No. Antonio McKee didn't show up there. I just lost it. Oh, John Marsh was there a lot. I don't know
So
if you
John
remember.
Marsh, if
Yeah.
you the craziness, we should have him hopefully this month.
Oh yeah. Okay.
The
Yeah.
keys to the kingdom, like if you know what questions to ask, he's got one of the craziest careers ever.
John Marsh.
Jude, he really does, man.
Yeah. I mean, I knew John really well. Like John and I worked together for years in LA. He was the head of security, and I was like one of the main security guards, and we just yeah. John and I go way back. Yeah.
Eddie Ruiz, did you ever roll with
Eddie
him?
Ruiz, he brought so believe it or not, John got paid by Zuffa to try to train Tank Abbott to get Tank Abbott
Yeah.
to the level where he could possibly compete against a guy like Frank Mir or Cabbage or whoever. And so John's job was to train him in jiu-jitsu and get him up to speed. And he through that met Eddie Ruiz, and he brought Eddie Ruiz on the job site. And so Eddie Ruiz was doing security with me and John Marsh and a few other guys. Eddie he talked a lot. And I don't mean in a bad way, but he would tell us about how he was training for fights, and he would say, I go to the track and I run a 5-minute mile, and then I take a 1-minute break, and then I run another 5-minute mile, and I take a 1-minute break. And he said he would do 3 5s like that, and he would run a mile in between that. The guy never came and actually trained with us to so whatever. That's
He seems like a guy, and I'm not trying to be insulting here, but he seems like a guy that he's been on a few prison yards.
yeah, he's like that. He's like that.
Yeah,
Jason Maxwell was there.
jail guard, another jail guard.
Yeah, yeah, for a bit. Yeah, Jason Maxwell was there, kind of fresh off of his win over
Jens
Jens,
Pulver,
which was a huge upset at the time. And a guy that Jason Maxwell is friends with, named Keith Sutton, who owns a gym in Texas now.
still in the game. Yeah,
he and I became really good friends, and he was a good guy, and he was there a bit, but people would come through. Hanato Babalu Sobral would come in.
Babalu, do you remember?
Yeah, yeah.
Like the match that was never made was him and Tito, and the things that he would say to Tito and about Tito, like, if you're Tito Ortiz and you're about that life and you got the flames on your car, like, you can't really worry about a payday. You can't let a guy say that stuff to you, with condom, without condom, I fuck him. You're like, wait, what? What? Yeah. He's one of my favorite interviews. He's just like, and like it was almost like they protected Tito with Chuck because he could never beat Chuck, but he could probably beat Tito.
Yeah. I think I actually thought that he was gonna upset Chuck the first time they fought.
Me too.
I saw that fight live. I think that was my first live UFC event. Rico took me to that one because he was cornering Vladimir. Vladimir fought Travis View, or however you say his name. I was never able to say.
Yeah, View. No, you got it. Yeah, Minnesota.
Yeah. He Vladimir fought him, and so I got a ticket and I was able to watch. And I really thought that that Babalu was going to pull off the upset, but when he walked out, it became pretty apparent that he was sort of out of it, and he wasn't confident, and he went out there really gun shy, and that just happens sometimes, man. People don't understand. It's so hard to be on the way that you are, like to bring your capabilities into a fight fully. It takes a lot, and so we never see the full potential of a lot of fighters. And the problem with MMA is it's so physically dangerous that you're not able to, like think about a basketball season. Like LeBron and his team can lose a couple times in a row, and ESPN will be like, "Oh, they lost a couple times," and blah blah blah. It doesn't matter. He's still going to the playoffs. You know what I'm saying? Like, they get to win, lose, win, lose. We don't get that. Lots of times we're lucky if our health or if the industry allows us to fight more than once or twice a year. And that makes it really difficult to show up, put 12 weeks of training into one moment, and be that guy that you've been trying to be in the training room in the fight. It's crazy. It's like balancing on the tip of a needle or something sometimes. It's one of the hardest things to do. And so I think that's what you saw with him. He just, whatever reason, there's a million reasons why you can come into a fight flat. And that's why you got to give praise to the guys that are able to pull that off and be that guy. I'll tell you what, dude, 9 times out of 10, Leon Edwards doesn't lose that way to Bilal Muhammad. It's just, and I'm not putting Bilal down.
It's the game. It's the game.
The way it is. It's the way it is, man. And I know in training, like, someone that's 10 levels below me will beat me every now and then. And that's just how it is. And you just accept that. And if you're an idiot, you dwell on it. But lots of times that happens in the fight, man. That's the way it is.
Speaking of hard fights, WEC 4, August 21st, 2002. August 31st, 2002, you fight Kurt Pelligrino in a rematch for the inaugural WEC belt, which later became incredibly prestigious. But it started with you versus Pellegrino. He almost looks like he was hanging on in that fight. Like he injured his rib. Something happened in that fight to him where
I kicked him in the stomach towards the very end of the fight.
yeah.
I got him with a body kick. But yeah, man, I mean, look, here's the thing. I was training at Raw, but I had only been training there since February that year. And 3 of those months, I was out with a shoulder injury, like a really bad, a complete AC joint separation. So it wasn't enough time, even though I was training with high level wrestlers, it wasn't enough time for me to become a competent enough defensive wrestler to deal with someone with his wrestling pedigree, and so
He was laying and praying, like he was holding, and
for sure he was, but like I should have stopped the takedowns, and that has been something that like that caused me problems my entire career. If you watch the Clay Guida fight in 2008, 6 years later, is not that much different. It's a guy getting to the ground and holding on for dear life and just winning by points. And I'm not trying to put Clay down. I love him, and like he won that fight. But I guess what I'm getting at is like that was always my problem. Was like I can wrestle a bit, but when push comes to shove and I get someone really motivated and they want to use the cage and they use the cage well, they can get me down, they can stay on top. And I lost a lot of decisions like that. And so that Pellegrino fight was it was like that. And it was just, that was the biggest bummer of a fight for me, man. Let me tell you, like flying back home from Uncasville, Connecticut, and this was like right after this whole Lee Murray versus Tito Ortiz street or bar fight thing happened. And at this WEC, all of the Militich guys were there because Tony Fricklin fought there. And all of the Team Punishment guys were there. Tito was there, this giant yellow head, and walking around with his UFC belt everywhere. Losing that fight and then being disrespected by my training partner / coaches, like being kind of like joked on and shit by Frank Trigg and Vladimir Matyushenko. It did something to me. I had to fly home for 5 hours with this dude, Colin Oyama, sitting next to me, listening to like his headphones on so loud that I could hear it through the roar of the airplane, listening to the Pride theme song music on a loop. And he's a big dude, takes up the whole fucking like seat.
Armrest, everything.
And then Tito Ortiz sitting in front of me, keeping his belt on, by the way, in his coach seat, sits in front of me, takes his whole seat all the way back. I get this giant yellow head inches from my eyes with his black roots coming in. And I've got Colin Oyama next to me going like this, nodding to the Pride symphonic theme song. And I'm dealing with this like decision loss against the guy who like just held me down and stalled for 5.5 hours. And when I got through after that, I was like, you know what I mean? Like it put a little bit of, it lit a fire under my ass. And it also made me realize like how I wanted to be treated moving forward by my training partners, how I wanted to be treated moving forward by any coaches that I had. And it helped shape me and help me realize what I didn't want to deal with. And it wasn't like a light switch that I was able to flip and change things, but I was able to work towards that in my career and try to be the best fighter I could and try to surround myself with the people that respected me, and that was very important to me.
WEC, you mentioned it's just after Lee Murray beating up Tito Ortiz in the alley. Tony Fricklin was a very big part of that process. Pat Miletich as well. Was there bad blood there between those guys? Did you
Yeah,
pick up on
there
it?
definitely was. There was some guy, I don't know who his name was, what his name was, or who he was exactly, but he was like a hanger on with the team punishment guys. I think his name was Bo or something like that. He was a Fred Durst looking guy, which, you know what I mean? Like, what can you say?
Was it Bo Hirschberger?
No, it wasn't Bo Hirschberger. No,
Okay.
no,
Because that's a
no.
John Marsh
Wasn't
buddy.
that Bo? It was some other guy who literally looked like Fred Durst, or he's trying to look like
Oh,
Fred.
you're talking about One Man Army. Bo.
No, 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 no. It wasn't. No, 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 no. Wasn't
I
Oma.
mean, it's not a
No,
common
no,
name. Okay. All right,
no,
go
no, no,
ahead.
no, no, no. I know Oma very well.
I'm
I
shut.
know.
I like Oma, by the way.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah. No, I
yeah.
know Oma. It was not him. It was some guy who was a Huntington Beach guy, and I
Okay.
just remember him being in the seat one over, and like complaining the whole time and being like, "Yeah, Pat Miletich was trying to kiss my ass and say that everything's cool," and I'm like, "Fuck that! It ain't cool, bro. We can do this right here." And he was one of those guys that was talking a bunch of shit after the fact, and it's like there was definitely tension between those two teams, 100%,
Yeah.
100% was. But like, if if I was gonna be like involved and caught in some kind of crap in between those two, I would definitely be siding with the Militich guys. I had a history of being cordial with them, and I did not vibe with Tito or any of those dudes at all. They were those guys, Zach Light. None of those guys made any sense to me.
Yeah.
It
Future, exactly like future Bellator matchmaker at that point. Wow.
really, wow, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy in this sport how much you can be literally have no business in a position and you can just fake it until you make it. Like I can't even tell you how I'm not going to go around naming names because I'm probably got myself in enough trouble already. But like it's like I, this sport was just like if you just show up and pretend you're a coach, eventually you turn that bell on enough and you hit stop and start enough and you hand somebody a water enough, you're gonna be a coach somehow.
Yeah.
So
You
people are
carry a
gonna view you
bucket.
as such,
Yeah. You
and
carry a
you can
bucket.
become a matchmaker somehow,
Oh my God. I know exactly who you're talking about, dude. I
knowing
know
nothing.
exactly who you're talking
You can
about,
become a photographer,
dude.
photographing the UFC live and having no idea what you're doing, but you got the credential now, you've got a camera, and you just sit there and you click, 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 and
And you got the
hopefully
clout.
something
You got the
eventually
clout.
you figure
Yeah.
it out,
Yeah,
but
yeah. We're not going to name names, but King of the Cage had a matchmaker that I could not believe that he was matchmaking here in the Midwest. It was shocking to me. But
was his last name the same as a sport, which includes
it was Mike Camp. Come on,
oh,
dude.
I thought you were gonna say Chaz Bowling. Okay.
Well, I mean, he's another guy. Like he had somebody die on his show, and he got away with it. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, man.
yeah, strange. You actually go on a nice little tear, and you know the thing about this after Kurt Pellegrino, Chiaparelli starts cornering you. So
Yeah.
you'd sit here and say, "Wow, they were kind of cracking on me, Trigg and Matt and
Yeah.
Shenko." Well, Chiaparelli, who was kind of at the big kids table, now has pulled up a chair for that of yourself. And I always thought like that was really cool.
That meant everything to me.
Oh, for sure.
That was like, you have to understand, like Rico is like a father figure to me. And that's probably why, I didn't even realize it at the time when I was young. My first stint at Raw, my first stint dealing with Rico, this guy was so magnetic, and some people are just like that. They've got like the Jesus thing going on, whether they want to or not.
Yeah.
And he played with it. He felt the power of that, and he played with it a little bit, but he also didn't like it. I can tell you this much. He didn't like it. He didn't like the fact that people were willing to just show up and hang on his every word and follow him as he walked around the gym, follow him into his office while he would sit there and make phone calls and just watch him operate and live life.
Oh,
This it's how it was though. And everyone was attracted to him because he's a special dude. And what he has to say is real. You know what I mean? He's got that about him. And I admired him just as much as these other people did, though I might not have treated him that way. And so that was huge. Him coming to that fight against Tripson Cariciano, this Hawaiian kid, that was a big deal to me. But right after that fight happened, I was injured again, and I got injured a few more times, and it was really difficult for me to keep training the way that they were training. I mean, have you ever heard of Sylvester Terkay?
is that the wrestler from Russia? I'm assuming.
Sylvester Terkay was a wrestler, but he was a United States
Was he in the
guy.
rings? Was he in the rings?
I think he did ring.
I know I read his name. I assumed Russian based on the last name,
He's
but I
a
knew he fought rings.
giant dude, huge guy. Had that if you're aware of wrestling lore, he had that King Kong Brody thing going on.
Oh God,
Bruiser Brody type of
fuck
thing.
yeah,
Yeah, you know, big dude, long black hair,
Samoan
beard.
looking.
Yeah. He actually got second in the NCAA national championships and lost to Brock Lesnar in the championships. So this guy was like huge.
Good shit.
And I was like having to roll with this guy, and like, you know what I mean? Like, just I tore my calf going with him. I messed up my other shoulder training with Vladimir. So the training, it was wearing on my body at the time, and I was still trying to adapt. And then right around, I don't know, 2004, Rico sort of disbanded the team. He said, I'm going to deal with Vladimir a little bit, and I'm going to deal with Trig. Fernando's out of here, and everybody else, I'm not doing this anymore. And that's when I started to have to migrate. That's when I went to Millennia and started with John Alessio. And my roommates were Javier Vasquez and Gabe Ruediger, and just training with all those guys. So it was a transition.
You're 22. You're not from there. You're a perennial B side on any promoter's card. Where's mom at? Does she ever think about relocating and maybe you guys, helping your foundation in California?
Yeah, I mean, so economically, she had zero resources to provide me. One thing that she did provide me with was love and a whole lot of like, she was very elemental in me sticking with it and not quitting. She was actually the person when I got the call to fight Cedric Stewart. Yeah, on 4 days notice, she was like, you should do it. And I wasn't going to do it because I was like, oh man, it's not enough time and I don't know, and yada yada. And she was just like, you should do it. And so she and I remained close at the time, but she didn't really, I mean,
she wasn't adding to the equation.
No, she couldn't add to the equation. Okay. And I was like, living on living room floors, like doing like one or two nights a week at a nightclub that me and John Marsh worked at, and kind of, like just working a little bit and training twice a day and just trying to do the fighter thing, trying to make it, trying to be that guy. And it was tough. One other person, ding, light bulb went off, that was there a lot, Lyoto Machida, who he and I don't keep in touch or anything, but he's one of those guys, if I see him, we
that's your guy.
Yeah, he's a good guy, real good guy. Yep.
Is dad contacted you at all, or is it just?
I don't have nothing to do with dad. And when I was 6, for a lot of reasons, he he wasn't a good guy. He wasn't doing good things. He says he's doing good things now. I haven't spoken to him since I was 6. I was 6. He got on the phone asking if I would forgive him for what he had just done. And I got on the phone and I said, I don't want to see you or talk to you ever again. I hung up the phone and I haven't seen or talked to him since then. Although he has tried to contact me, I don't have nothing to do with him.
Yeah,
No.
sometimes that's a blessing, like you
Yeah.
figured it out early.
My wife thinks it would be good at this point if I contacted him, but I'm thinking about it. Not sure,
Yeah, yeah, you know what I mean. It shouldn't be a heavy weight on a scale.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's if it happens, it happens. Are you still sober?
Yeah, I mean, I was never not sober.
Have
I
you ever
was,
had a sip alcohol?
oh yeah, in my life, yeah. I mean, I've drank. I could take it or leave it. Luckily, because I've got this Scottish Irish DNA in me. Like so many people, even from my family, have become susceptible to that whole thing.
Yeah,
But
me too. Yeah,
it didn't ever do anything for me. I've messed with it here and there. It's never become a problem. I honestly, I view it as like an expensive way to consume a beverage, and doesn't taste good, doesn't make me feel good, doesn't make me chatty, doesn't make me giddy, doesn't make me get the girls. Like it never did those things. It was just an expensive drink when I could have been drinking water.
water.
So for me, I could take it or leave it. And
So
so,
no mushrooms, no weed.
oh, I mean, like that's a little different. I've messed with weed a lot. I don't really anymore at this point in my life. I feel like it takes my eyes off the ball a little
Smart.
bit too much.
I agree.
Some people they can do all right with weed. My wife smokes weed a lot. She's into it. I mean, I could take it or leave it. It's the same type of thing. Mushrooms, on the other hand, I mean, I'll trip like maybe once every year and a half or so.
Good move.
It's something
It's
that I need
healthy.
to
It's
do
good for
every
you.
now and then. But yeah,
And
yeah,
the way you talk about your father and the way those are things out of your control. It's things that you've experienced, and when you trip every year and a half, it kind of puts it in proper perspective. Like it
yeah,
doesn't weigh heavy on you. It's a non-factor. Like it
yeah,
wasn't your choice. It's just the hand that you were dealt,
yeah,
which is such a healthy way of looking at it. It really is,
yeah,
rather than traumatize yourself or
yeah,
mill it
for
over in your
sure,
head.
for sure. Yeah,
You the next time I see you fight live is October 12th, 2003. It's actually my brother Jimmy's birthday gift. I brought him there. We got front row tickets. You're in a 4-man tournament, an extreme challenge, and Laverne Clark, dude, Laverne Clark is so he is grimy,
mm.
dirty, and man, does he hit hard.
Yeah, 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 yeah. What's funny is I threw a Hail Mary and almost knocked him out.
In the third round,
Yeah, I did,
bro.
I did, I did. It landed, but like I stupidly shot right off of it. Like I was like, I'm gonna throw this overhand right and I'm gonna shoot. And I think I underestimated his wrestling at the time. I was fighting a weight class up. This whole thing, the whole reason why I got brought there to do that is because what was happening was I kept getting injured at Raw and I wasn't getting any fights and nobody was getting me fights. Trig was now on this path to fighting Hughes and fighting in the UFC. The focus was on Trig, slightly on Vladimir, but mostly on Trig. And there wasn't anyone who really cared about my career as far as getting these small shows going and getting into them. So I reached out to Monty and I was like, hey, here I am again. How about this pro contract? And he's like, well, I have a tournament at 170. And he's like, I can't afford to pay you much and I can't afford to fly out
Oh
the
God.
corner, but I will, like you can do this tournament. And I'm like, all right, like let's do it. I'll try it. And Laverne Clark at the time was like, I hadn't fought a UFC guy yet. He had been in the UFC a bit. He had done some things. He went 3 rounds with Frank Trigg in the WFA, and he was a tough guy, tough, wiry, scrappy guy,
hard puncher, hard puncher,
hard puncher,
and grinding and grinding.
Yeah. He
like
was.
You're going to get a thumb to the eye. He's going to grab a rope. He's going to hook the lip
for
of
sure.
the ring.
No, he was grabbing the ropes the whole time.
He's doing all of that.
But I underestimated his wrestling, his offensive wrestling, and I allowed him to take me down thinking that I was going to be able to pull off something off my back. And he did the same thing Pelligrino did in a way. He just kind of didn't try to pass the guard, just stayed on top, and he just,
wrist control, bicep control. Yep.
Yeah, grinded out a decision against me. And the reason why that fight even happened was because I got a hold of Monty, and I don't know.
Did you a favor.
That's when things started to kind of separate with the guys at Raw. Like Rico was kind of miffed that I had gone and got my own fight. And he was like, all right, you're doing your own thing, And so I didn't have anyone from Raw cornering me except for a friend of mine that had trained there a little bit. And he flew himself out there. And so, yeah, it was kind of that fight left a bad taste in my mouth, but you just gotta keep moving forward with this. You can't.
And look who's in the other corner. You got Tim Sylvia. You got Rory Markham. You got I think Jess Pulver may have been there. I'm not sure if Pulver was or not. And
I know the main voice in his corner was Tim Sylvia. Surprisingly gave him really good ground advice.
Very good.
But what are you gonna do? Yeah, and he listened very well. He listened to his corner very well. So it was, and afterwards, man, after the fight, he won the tournament. He won his second fight, and
beat a Polish kind of main event. Virgil, with an S.
Pichik. Yeah,
I know. Yeah.
And who was walking around there that day was Galata. Andrew Galata.
Andrew Galata was there with Virgil. Yes,
he was. Yeah, and in that fight, so after the fight, I saw Laverne, and I think like if you just fought one fight and lost like I did, you got $200. The winner was getting $1,500, and he got a belt. And I saw Laverne, he was sitting there, and he had gone to the concession, and he was eating this fried chicken. He was just digging on it. I was like, good fight, man. He's like, I ain't gonna lie, man. I needed this. I'm 3 months behind on rent. I needed this bad. And I was just like, what can you say, man? Like, he deserved
I might not be able to pay I might not be able to pay for the gas in my car to get me home. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was what it was, man. It's fighting. It's what we all do,
Yeah. And here, like if like I said, you're checking a lot of these mid-90s boxes. Yeah. You take a loss in that fight, obviously, rather than be career conscious and forward thinking. And here's big picture. All right, I'll fight Jason Von Flue next. One of the little new, I guess, frontline guys from the pit.
Yeah.
But arguably the hottest team in MMA outside of Miletich at this time.
Yeah. So I fought Von Flue.
Fucking nuts.
Didn't know who he was at the time.
Knew after.
Had no idea who Von Flue was. No one really knew who he was yet because he hadn't been on The Ultimate Fighter and hadn't gotten a chance to do his little choke yet. But he was trying that on me, and it wasn't working. But one thing was he was getting close to it. He was trying to inside my guard and inside my half guard. And what was really dumb about it is I had Cecil Peoples was the ref. And so Cecil,
that's scary. It's so scary.
Yeah, man. Say no more. Cecil was the ref, and at one point, and near the end of the second round, Von Flue's got me in like a head and arm version of his choke, but I still have half guard, and so he doesn't quite have the leverage to finish it. And I'm like this, and then at some point. And I'm defending. I'm fine, by the way. I mean,
he's working on something that works incredibly well later on.
Yeah. It's
just not ready yet.
He doesn't quite have it, right? And then Cecil Peoples just all of a sudden goes, stop. And I'm like, yo, what are you doing? And he's like, you didn't tap. And I'm like, no, I didn't tap. And
you gave him a thumbs up, actually, if you watch it.
And then he goes, oh, sorry. And then he lets us start again. And so because of that, Von Flue's corner was pissed. They thought I tapped and said I didn't. It wasn't the case at all. He wasn't close to submitting me.
No.
Second round, I mopped the floor with him, but it's a 2-round fight, so they call it a draw.
I hated 2-round fights. I hated that. But also, like, it seemed like he blew everything he had trying to go for that finish. And when I interview him, I think that this is going to be one of those times in his career where he understood pacing.
Yeah.
Because it was very one-sided.
Jason ended up being he was ended up a good guy.
Decent fighter too. Decent fighter.
Yeah, he's a good-hearted person. I feel like I've only got good vibes from him since then. So yeah.
Speaking of good guys, Gabe Ruediger falls into that category as well. And a solid fighter. Watching him on The Ultimate Fighter and you being a friend of his, was that a difficult experience for you?
It wasn't that difficult at the time because me and Gabe had a major falling out right before he went and did that. I will tell you though, this if you were to ask the same exact question and you would have put Andy Wang's name in, I would tell you yes, it was very difficult watching somebody that's that tough, that good, kind of fall apart like that and then have that much ridicule and that much hate thrown at them. I don't know what it is, man. But like I've known many people who have gotten that type of treatment from the fans and everything. And yeah, at the time with Gabe, me and Gabe were really on the outs. Okay. And so I was just like, man, like he made his bed, he's got to lay in it, like whatever. But seeing Andy go through that at the time, now me and Gabe are cool. We're
I mean, that's what friends do. They go, there's peaks and valleys, man.
Yeah, we were roommates, and him, and Javier Vasquez were roommates, and it was just kind of like it was a volatile situation.
Yeah, you're not compatible. Yeah, you're not compatible to live with each other.
And you know what was really funny about that roommate situation was like, well, I had been there for only like 2 months, and Javi was ready to kick him out, and I was the guy who mediated, and I had a meeting with the three of us, and I fixed that shit. And then 6 months later, I was like, Javi, it's either me or him. that's what it was like living with Gabe at the time.
A little bit of a Viking. Yeah.
Gabe was a drama guy, but yeah, good dude. You know,
the Ultimate Fighter. Ultimate Fighter 6, he's on 5.
Yeah.
You talk about Andy Wang as well. I don't want to name any other names because I know somebody listens to this, they'd get mad, but it seemed like the hype machine to really dump on somebody, like the money that they put in to shit on somebody was 10x what they put in to build somebody at the Ultimate Fighter. Did you get that feeling as well?
I did. And I will tell you this, at the 6th season that I was on, you had 5 seasons to see the way that they did things, and everybody, at least on my team, on Matt Hughes's team that I was on, we were all like very much worried and concerned about how we were going to be portrayed, which influenced the way that we behaved. And I think that that was something that the producers had not experienced up until that point. Because season 5 was just a mess. Like you had like Marlon Sims and that Noah guy fighting each other, and you know it was
Brian Garrity kind of mediating it.
Crazy entertaining season, and a lot of good guys on there. Gray Maynard and Nate Diaz, and
one of your buddies, Gray Maynard. Yep.
Yeah, one of my closest friends. Yeah, and you know, man, like we were all just all of us guys on Team Hughes. We were just like, fuck, like how are they going to portray us?
Dude,
like, how is this going to happen?
And they would 10x the spend on making somebody that's not even going to get a contract fucking their life up.
So, oh yeah, totally. Yeah,
right?
yeah. It was brutal. What they
Dude,
did to Andy was not okay. You know what
dude,
I mean? And
what they did
he's
to
got
Mark
a
Lehman wasn't okay either.
yeah. That wasn't cool. I was
Jason
with
Thacker.
Mark a lot.
Jason Thacker, that wasn't okay.
Yeah, that wasn't cool. No, that's why, like, I don't know. So like going into that, when people say like, "Oh, this guy was just grumpy," or "He was just," I hated him on the show. Like I heard that so much, and it's like I was there to win the show.
Yeah.
Imagine you're there to win the show, and out of the 15 guys, maybe like 7 of them are just like deer caught in the headlight, and they're just like, oh shit, like what am I doing here? And like, oh my god, like what's going on? It's like the Shawshank Redemption when they check the everybody in, and the one dude's just crying like a blubbering fool, and people are screaming at him and stuff. Like, it's like you had guys, 7, like at least a few of them were like, oh shit. And then the other guys were all just like complete imbeciles, like people that like did not belong there. Not only did they not belong there, but they were just there to drink and be obnoxious. And I was
Dude,
like, this is my life. I'm trying to use this as a stepping stone to get to where my career should have been 2 years ago had I not signed an exclusive contract with King of the Cage. Can you guys please take this seriously like I am? And then, oh, you're not going to take it seriously? Well, I don't want to be around you. I don't want to be around people who are just like completely just, it's like a frat party every day. It's like
I look at it this way, like me sitting on the couch watching it, it appeared to me that those are the scratch off tickets in case like whoever it is we're dumping on to kind of 10x their life. We've got some extra bullets in the chamber to shit on these guys as well. And those guys were just unwilling, like kind of just to understand, they were there for possible entertainment, both good and bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like a social experiment. Like the whole thing is just like, can we get 16 different personalities, put them all into one house where you have 16 guys living in a 4-bedroom house, 16 grown men, plus you have camera crew, plus they're mic'd up. Those little octagon necklace things are microphones. So they're listening to you unless you're taking a shower. They are listening to you the whole time and watching you. And you are basically put in there with no books, magazines, no media, no contact to or from the outside world.
No.
And it's made so that you get angry or you do dumb things or you just act like a fool. And so I was not a pranking type of guy. It's just like I was there to do business.
It was just a business trip for you.
I was there to win the show. That's what I was there for. I was not there to do a bunch of things and market myself or anything like that. And these other guys, some of them, like George Soteropoulos, I didn't have nothing to do with him during the show. He's on the other team, and he was the other good guy on the team. Everyone thought it was going to be me and George in the finals, but besides George, like everybody on Matt's team, like most of those guys, they were just like carrying on all hours of the night, just there, just drinking, just doing stupid shit. And like there were some guys like Matt Arroyo who I don't really get the vibe that he was doing that type of thing, but at the same time, he was just like hanging with these dudes and joking with these dudes, and they were just up all night, obnoxious and everything. And I'm like, man, like I'm here to get good night's sleep every night, train and win this thing. And that's what I'm here for. And anyone that's in my way, like there's going to be a problem. So they viewed me as, oh, like this dude's grumpy. It's like
Party pooper. Yeah.
Bro, I'm here to win this thing. And that's what I did. I won the thing. You can't take that away from me.
No.
So I mean, yeah, dude, it was a weird social experiment shoving that many people in one house together. And by that time, I mean, look, sometimes people, they ask me, was this thing scripted? and all this stuff. You know, people often ask that about reality shows, because there are reality shows out there that like are a bit scripted or whatever. And it wasn't scripted, but one thing they did do was, like, halfway through the filming of it, they realized that they weren't getting enough content, and they were trying all their tricks to get content and to pull drama out of people. And so they put the cameras down and had the producer have a big meeting with all of us. And they were like, you guys are sitting here talking about music and movies all the time. We can't use this footage. Could you guys please talk about what's happening in the fights? And like, we're just kind of like, oh, fucking, like, all right. Like, and then the big owner of the production company comes in, and he basically says, hey, look, to you guys, I know some of you guys, and he looks at these goofball frat boy guys that I'm talking about, and he's like, I know some of you guys don't mind doing crazy stuff. He's like, don't burn the house down, but anything beneath burning the house down, do it. And so, like, 2 days later, these guys just for no reason kicked a bunch of holes in the walls and like busted holes in the drywall and like made a hole in between the living room and the bathroom. You know what I mean? Just did a bunch of dumb stuff so that they had footage, because they didn't have any footage, because we were all, at least the guys on my team, were like
business.
We were overworked. Like, Matt Hughes overworked us, pushed us to the limit, and it was one of those deals where these guys were burnt out. Most of them had lost their first fight already. They were discouraged. They were just, you know, like, worried about how they were going to look on TV when this thing finally comes out, you know. And nobody was talking about anything. We were talking about music. We were talking about Quentin Tarantino movies. We were talking about, you know, like, whatever kind of stuff could pull us back into the real world, because we wanted an escape from that reality.
Yeah, the prison. Yeah, the prison that you guys were in. You fought in unsanctioned events in the country of Mexico. Heto Maximo. Your original opponent was Alex Garcia, and he pulls out, and they pull in Akbarh Arreola to fight you. Those Mexican shows, and I don't know. I heard rumors about this one in particular. I know Tony Perez was the promoter. Was this one of the Mexico promotions where the promoter kind of disappeared?
No, from what I understand, okay, from what I know, Tony actually, in my opinion, wasn't a bad guy. There was two shows. There was the Reto Maximo, and there was something else. There was another show. My friend,
Total Combat was towards the border, but then there was another one. It was El Octagano. There may have been one more. That's Master Vic's promotion.
Whatever the promotion was, that my friend that I had mentioned earlier, Keith Sutton, whatever promotion he fought Alex Garcia on, the same promotion that Alex Garcia fought Joe Hurley on.
Okay.
That
Lions Den guy.
That promoter paid supposedly everybody to no-show. That's why Alex Garcia no-showed the fight. Akbarh Arreola was the guy that was Tony Perez's, like trained at Tony Perez's gym and was his guy. He was supposed to fight in the main event against somebody else. There was only one fight that night, and me and Akbarh Arreola were the only fighters that showed up. And so that's why we had to fight. And so he was my opponent on 45 minutes notice. And that was the only fight they had that night. And I won that in like a minute or a minute and a half or something like that. And I felt bad because so many people were there and they paid for tickets to watch fights, and they got to see a 1 minute fight, basically.
Oh, well, he got to see one fight. He didn't refund anyone. Well, there's your organization. They're done after that.
Out of all my pro fights, that was the lowest paying one. I got $150 I would have gotten 100 if I lost, and I got 100. I got a $50 bonus because I won.
Wow.
And
All out on street
it
tacos.
covered the best Western
Yeah.
stateside that me and my girlfriend had stayed at.
It's so fucked up. And you're like, if you really look at your career, like if I got to say one thing about Mac Danzig, he's not afraid of a tournament. Like you're
Yeah,
really not, dude. Like you got another one, the IFC in Montana,
yeah,
Brandon Olson and Mark Maron.
yeah,
You got a rear naked choke in your first one and a triangle in the second. Like you're rolling. IFC, Luke Spencer, Hammer House guy. Luke
yeah.
Spencer, is he a talented guy? You know, I guess it's kind of questionable in regards to like how good he is. He's a tough SOB. Luke
Yeah,
Spencer can crack you, and he's not afraid of a fight, man. Luke Spencer's
yeah,
gonna get,
yeah,
he's gonna make it dirty.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I respect that win, dude. You get a rear naked choke. Mike Valdez, Diego Sanchez's training partner. You know, you're making your King of the Cage debut June 12th, 2005.
yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah,
Gladiator Challenge. Fuck, dude. Nick Ertl. Ertl was a
yeah.
tough dude.
Earl
Caesar
was a tough
Gracie
guy.
guy. He's got
He,
a win over.
he was a champion at the time.
Yeah, he's got a win
Yeah,
over
yeah.
Nam Fan.
That
Like Nam
that
Fans don't
fight
choke.
that fight against Nick Ertl was in
Bloodbath.
yeah, it was a bloodbath. It was in a Best Western parking lot in the middle of the sun, in the middle of the day. Guys were getting burned on their backs from being on the mats because the sun was just beating down on the mats of the cage. And right before my fight, they finally got the bright idea to take towels in ice water and like wipe down the mats. So I didn't get burned too bad. But yeah, that's what we're dealing with. And I mean, like you want to talk about like
It's
the
such a
lowest of the low. Gladiator Challenge is the lowest of the low. Like, I mean,
Ted Williams. Really?
bro, like just like you want to talk about promoters that don't give a fuck. That's Gladiator Challenge, man. Yeah, fucking always was. You know, it took them a year and a half to give me the belt that I won from that fight. They gave me the runaround for like a year and a half. And as a kid coming up at the time, all I wanted was my belt. You know what I mean? Like, oh man. And then I won the King of the Cage belt, and I was like, cool, I'm a double title holder in two organizations. You know, that's what it's what you I mean, it's the truth. It's a little far-fetched, but I was a world champion in two organizations at the same
Well,
time, and I wanted both of my belts and didn't get that belt for like a year and a half or
okay.
more.
So, let me kind of clue people in, like set the table for the time. So in 2005, the UFC, they don't have a 155-pound weight class. So like you obviously got guys like Josh Thompson, Eve Edwards, you know, Hermes Franca, guys that fought in the UFC that are no longer there. But then like you got the independent grind. And that independent grind here, King of the Cage, Gladiator Challenge champion, that of yourself.
Yeah.
WEC champion, your teammate Gabe Ruediger. That's a hell of a room to be in, especially with Javi Vasquez there. TKO out in Canada, you had Sam Stout. IFC, Roger Huerta. XFO was Clay Guida. FFC, Dave Gardner. XFC, Keith Sutton. Total Combat, Alex Garcia. Super Brawl, a relatively unknown guy at the time and not respected by anybody at this point in his career, KJ Nunes. So if
Yeah.
you look at the regional champions across the country at 155 pounds, it was as good as you get. It was as good as it gets. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. You know, like and it was a real bummer because we all wanted, all of us, we wanted to get to like either like Pride had started Bushido, and that was a good thing because that was 160 pounds. It was like basically the same weight class. And but then when the UFC, right after that awesome fight between Eve Edwards and Josh Thompson,
Oh, Hall of Fame fight. Hall of Fame fight.
took out the 155-pound weight class. I'm like, what are you guys doing? And that is when Monty gave me the advice to sign an exclusive contract with King of the Cage. And right, not too, I remember talking to Joe Silva at some point while I was in that King of the Cage contract, and he was honest with me. He was just like, look, Mac, like I bet this contract isn't very like legally binding. And I'm like, yeah, dude, it's not. It's like triple spaced and it's like 2 pages.
It's white out.
And it
There's
doesn't, yeah,
white
I
out
mean,
on
it doesn't even like it doesn't even use like legal language or anything.
legalese.
And he said, and I remember him saying this, he said, it doesn't matter if you signed an exclusive contract on like a bar napkin. If it says that on it, that you signed something, just the fact that we would have to go to court for it is enough for us not to touch it. And I said, all right, well,
Well, then why do I got to sign it? Why don't we just shake hands?
I know, I know.
You know?
See, Terry made me sign it because I think he saw something in me, saw that I was like up and coming and I was doing some things, and he knew that I was going to be serious about this and want to do something with it, and so he wanted to keep me for a while, and it was a battle between me and him the whole time. I just wanted out of it, and he just wanted to throw me at tough guys that didn't really
He
have
couldn't,
a big
dude.
name.
He
Yeah.
couldn't wait to take that belt away from you. He could
Yeah,
not.
the Clay French fight
wait.
was set up for that. That's what the Clay French fight was, because he knew that I was going to go to Pride, and like Pride wanted me to fight, and he was like, okay, this will be the end of your contract, but I want him to go to Pride on a
I
loss.
lost.
And so I lost the split decision at Clay French.
And I mean, Clay French couldn't pass an eye exam under a normal like state regulation that actually checked it. I mean, he couldn't. Like he overperformed and was incredibly talented, but was not really legal to fight in most states. So even putting the belt around him, still not an ideal situation for them.
Yeah. But I think he just set it up that way. He knew I was gonna have. He knew that a wrestler was going to cause me enough problems. A wrestler like Clay was going to cause me enough problems.
It was Kurt Pelligrino. He's just trying to mimic the Kurt Pelligrino recipe.
Yeah. And like, I didn't lose that fight. Like, if I would dispute any fight, I had a lot of close decision losses. I had a close decision loss to Matt Wyman in a fight of the night in the UFC. I had a close decision loss to Gomi in a fight of the night in the UFC.
Oh, dude,
I can accept those. You know what I mean? And I can also accept like the legit losses, like my Jim Miller fight. You know, he won that fight, you know. But the Clay French fight, that one, if I had anyone that I would say, man, like I would like to get that fight looked at by a different panel, they would be that one. But hey, it is what it is. It ain't Clay's fault. He fought hard. I wasn't robbed. It wasn't like Martin Kampman versus Diego Sanchez.
No. But what it was we've got a champion. Let's go get him hometowned against the challenger, which it's supposed to be the exact opposite. Like the ingredients of a successful organization, although fair is fair. But if it's a coin toss where you can't figure it out, you got to side with the champion. And that's fact.
Yeah.
So, Mac, we've had you for 2 hours, dude. And here, you got the Frank Kemence. You win by rear naked choke. It's Kirmsey, I apologize. And then you've got Takamura Nakayama, who is an absolute savage. You know, a mainstay of the Japanese MMA, JMMA. Dude, it was Gladiator Challenge versus King of the Cage champions. Like, on paper, that's a huge deal. That's a huge deal, especially when a 55-pound division doesn't exist in the UFC.
Yeah. That fight still to this day is probably the most meaningful fight in my career.
Your knees.
Because I was finally getting a chance to fight a true international fighter. This is a guy who not only beat the crap out of Charlie Kohler, who was a very tough guy in King of the Cage to win that title, but, and this is a big one, he had a draw with Rumina Sato, and Rumina Sato was like one of my heroes growing up, was like the guy for his time in Shudo. And Rumina Sato was just
greatest
so
at the
good.
time. Yeah, in my
so
opinion,
good.
he is the first pound for pound, undisputed number one in the world. Rumino, I believe, gets at 155. I believe Rumino, he earned that distinction.
Yeah. And so I remember watching his fight against Rumina Sato, at Takumi Nakayama's fight against Rumina Sato, and I was like, wow, man, this guy Sato couldn't stop him, and he just kept coming. And I watched him beat Kawajiri at the time. Kawajiri avenged that loss.
Yeah,
But he did beat Kawajiri. And so I was like, man, like this is a tough fight. And I was very nervous for that fight. But I put so much into that, and that was my chance to finally be like, hey, am I at that level? Am I at that international level? Or am I just some regional guy that's putzing around and I'm okay? And when I won that fight, that fight meant more to me than pretty much there was something special about that compared to every fight in my career. Yeah.
When was the last time you watched your pre-fight interview for that?
Oh,
revisit that. I highly suggest you revisit
15
it.
years at least.
You know, like sometimes guys got to kind of fake the funk in order to get themselves over some sort of mental hurdle.
Yeah.
That's not the case in this instance. You were locked in, dude. You were like in the zone.
Yeah.
And
that's cool.
Yeah, you were bulletproof. And you could see it in that pre-fight interview. And no matter what the odds were, when you see somebody that's very direct and understanding, like you've already won in your head, you just gotta go perform. Yeah. Oh, dude, it's so good, dude. It's so good, man. Yeah.
I'll have to look at it. Yeah, I haven't. I mean, last time I saw that might have been honestly like 2006 or something.
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
I like I try to like watch the whole event and kind of fast forward up to it so they don't cut that part off.
Yeah.
That's good shit, dude. It's 2 hours long. I'd really like you at some point to sit in with like a John Peretti or somebody like of your choice, because like, dude, I'll give you the notes and stuff like that. Like I'm mentally ill and OCD in regards to like putting things together. Like it's like a little storyboard. It's like I put a little storyboard together. It's a good little flow, and they're just conversational jump points. I think you've got an incredible insight. You're a fan of the sport. You pick somebody, dude, I'll line them up, and you want to sit in. I would love to do some history stuff with you, especially from the 90s guys.
It would be John Peretti for sure. I mean, like he is single-handedly responsible for making for helping the sport transition into
modern era.
Nobody was trying to put in weight classes and rounds. Nobody was trying to get this sanctioned with athletic commissions. Nobody was talking about technique. Nobody. This guy, even amongst his partners in extreme fighting, there wasn't anybody that was caring about that, and he wanted to be like a liaison to the fighters.
Dude, he's an artist, and he's doing an art exhibit in August in Houston. I think a bunch of us are going down there for it, just to kind of support him.
Yeah,
old school cat.
Cool. That's
so
cool.
Man, dude, absolute pleasure, Mac. Like you've been on our radar. I've had a ton of notes on you, obviously, for a long time. I'm glad I don't know, like I saw you make a couple comments on our Instagram page, and dude, it means the world to us when guys like you are like, hey, dude, this history stuff's kind of cool. It means the world to us. That's all I can tell you. We greatly, greatly appreciate you making the occasional comment as well as giving us 2 hours of your time.
Oh man, yeah, no worries. It's my pleasure. I really I don't know. I appreciate what you guys are doing, because not a whole lot of other people are
capable
on this.
Capable, not even capable of doing it. Like, dude, Jason Ireland, dude, you fucking fought Jason Ireland on St. Patrick's Day weekend in his hometown in Michigan.
Yeah, it was a tough fight.
As a champion, you were the champion, dude.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's the story of my career, man. If they gave me a nickname, they could have called me B-side. I was always the guy who, I was never treated like a champion.
No.
Unfortunately, as my wife started to fight, like the same thing happened to her, and she
You
got
can't let her go through it. You can't let them go through that, dude.
yeah. I just didn't have the pull anymore to like my name didn't have the pull to like get her the fights that she needed, and she was just like me, and she said, "I will take that fight," and I'm like, "This is not a good fight," and she's like, "No, I want to fight," and you kind of got to let a fighter fight, and that's what they do, and it is what it is. But yeah, man, no, it's my pleasure. We just scratched the surface. I mean, you want to
Dude, here, Bettis
talk about the
Mansouri,
UFC?
yeah, Rami Aram, like that's your training partners. I mean,
Yeah.
we didn't even really dig into the raw what was going on while you were there. Like you're in the practice room when
Yeah,
Matt Yushik was fighting Tito Ortiz. Like
yeah,
that's nuts.
yeah, man. I mean, I was there during Trig's whole lead up to the first Matt Hughes fight. Le
Legendary fight.
Yeah, Lyoto Machida's fight against Stephan Bonner
Oh,
before the Ultimate Fighter one even happened. Um,
Chiaperelli. Oh, dude. All right. So
yeah,
I call cornermen and like I dig into the weeds quite a bit. And
yeah,
Stephan Bonner's cornerman, it's a guy named Jeff Neal, who's a very successful gym owner here.
mm,
He just kept saying, "Yeah, we took a boat over. There was lots of insects, but the breasts on Rico Chiaperelli's girlfriend were so huge." Like he went on like a 20-minute. Like this was like 20 years ago, and you're still talking about it. She was like, she was so
yeah.
hot, dude. She was so hot. Like,
Yeah. That was Helen. Yeah, she was cool. She was cool. She was cool, man. Like, yeah, but she was in that industry, so
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It's funny. It's funny.
yeah,
Mac,
man.
absolute
Well,
pleasure. When BKFC comes to Oregon, if it's close to Bend, dude, whether it's lunch or something like that, I
yeah,
consider it an honor to take you to lunch.
that would be awesome, man. I'm down.
Cool.
I'm down. Yeah,
Appreciate it.
hopefully, yeah.
Dude,
We'll see what happens with that whole thing. I would like to pull a Chris Lytle and jump in there, but
you want to do Chris? We got the last portion of his career. You want to do Chris? I can do. It's a pain.
Chris is awesome. We could talk about the UFC portion of my career too. We
Yep.
could talk to Peretti, any of these people. Chances are, if they're from that early era, I know them. And me and Chris knew each other from way back too, because I was trying to get Phyllis Lee to manage me for a little bit before I got back with Monte Cox in 2004, and I was talking to Chris Lytle a whole lot in that time, and we saw each other at the WEC where Gabe Ruediger won the title against Olaf Alfonso, and we chopped it up, and we've been cool ever since. But
Yeah.
man, yeah,
Cool. Excellent. Absolute pleasure, Mac Danzig. I hope you enjoyed this as much as we did. And we're going to be in touch. I'll make something happen. Just give me a
sounds
minute.
good, man.
Take care,
Have
buddy.
you back.
Check out the full interview on iTunes, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms.